Okay, so when you present your research, you are the playwright, the director, and the actor all at once and all at different times. So when you're first putting together your script or your talk together, you're kind of acting like the playwright. You know, you're thinking through your audience, your message, how you're going to shape that story and how you're going to communicate it to those people that are in front of you. A director then shapes that story and thinks of the whole picture and you know how each part will lead the audience on the journey that they want in order to get them to the end objective or the end goal. And then the actor is in charge of how they fit into the story, and they're also in charge of committing to their journey and committing to their specific tasks in order to tell their part of the story and then bring the audience along. So an actor is going to be thinking of those kind of very specific actions, which we'll get to in just a little minute. And they'll be committing to kind of, you know, one thing at a time to kind of bring you along that journey. So it's kind of at different stages, you are kind of behaving like different people in a play. So Julia and I are going to kind of take you through those different parts and focus a little bit more this time on the actor side.
Mhm.
So first, I'm going to get you to just stick into the chat what kind of presentations you might do to communicate your research. So is that, you know, standing up in front of a group of your peers? Is that a TED Talk? Is that, you know, like an Instagram story or something? Just kind of think about different kind of ways or videos on LinkedIn. They're really popular now. But yeah, just kind of thinking through what are kind of the what are the time what might you do? Let's see a few of them pop up so that we can kind of chat about those. Yeah,
Mhm.
conference, workshop presentations, poster presentations, absolutely. Talk, seminar, booth type engagements. Yeah, that's really interesting. Kind of having a little bit of a quick pitch and things to be ready for. Instagram videos, yeah.
Love it.
Conference presentations, lots of that. Yeah. Short TV interviews. Oh yeah, for sure. Talking to
Mhm.
potential donors. Yeah. 7 to 12 minute talks. Yeah. So you're kind of thinking through like the scope of it too. That's really good. Kind of thinking through exactly how much time do you have to include what you need to include? Yeah, that's really good. Thesis. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these are all really great. So
Mhm.
it's good to kind of keep that in mind. Because here, we'll just jump over to the next slide here. Thanks, Julia. So before you rehearse, you kind of want to think through, you know, how are you going to write this compelling script? And as we said, we're not going to focus that much on scripting because we're going to jump more into the rehearsing part. But things that you want to consider when you're thinking that through, of like what the venue is, where you're going to be, and then thinking through your audience, and their priorities. And again, you know, you want to be as specific as you can with this. You want to really think through, you know, what do you know about them? What don't you know about them? And for the answers that you don't know, kind of coming up with what might be the best audience for you to present to. That doesn't necessarily mean people who agree with you. It might mean people who are more skeptical. It might mean people that you have to convince. You have to really get on side because maybe that's a way that you can tell a better story. You can give yourself something to do. You can give yourself something to think, oh, I'm going to really convince them. You also want to think through your objectives. So again, what you want your audience to think, do, and feel. So that's really important. And we're going to kind of delve into that a little bit more too, because you really want to have that in mind, because that's kind of what's going to give you what to include in your presentation, what to exclude. You're really going to kind of think through what is the point? What is the message of your presentation? You're going to think through your arguments. So again, convincing them of your logic. How did you come to this? How did this all happen? Is this a logical and sound argument that you are making? Your credibility. You want to include that somewhere just so that they know why exactly you're up there talking to them. And again, emotional impact. And that's really important for a story. So that's kind of, you know, again, how to really get them on side through something that they can feel about, something that they can kind of go, oh, this is how this affects me. This is why I should care. So again, incorporating a story into that is kind of that speaks to the heart of your work. That's what is going to be the most effective. That's how you're going to get them emotionally. That's how you're going to get them to know why it's important, to know why they should care, because a good story can lead anyone, can make anyone do anything, really. You know, tell me a good story and I'll be right there with you. So yeah, impactful storytelling elements. So again, you're going to want to include things like stakes, You know, what can we gain by this information, and what do we stand to lose by this information if we don't get this out? Surprise, you know, we love a surprise. We love kind of not knowing what to expect next. We love being brought along a journey. And truth, of course. Truth is, you know, again, anything that's true, it's going to ring true for us. Duh. But it's gonna mean that it's that much more impactful for us, and it's gonna be that much more easy for us to really connect to it. Julia and I have a few more workshops about this, about kind of really delving into how to put a story into your work. But so check those out if you would like to kind of, we'll chat a little bit more about that. But we're going to move on to the rehearsey parts.
Mhm.
Okay, so breaking down a script. So one of the first things that an actor does when they get their script is that they do what's known as script work. So this helps an actor to understand why their character is saying the words that they're saying and know what direction the scene is going to go, so that they can do one thing at a time and end up at the end of where they want them to be at the end of the scene or the play. So objectives and actions. So this is really actory, but Julia and I, we love it. And so objectives are what you want your audience to think, do, and feel. And you're going to have an overall objective, which is kind of the end goal of what you want your audience to think, do, or feel. But then you're going to also have smaller objectives that lead them to that end. And it's really good to be as specific as you can be with those smaller objectives, so that you can really commit to them and in the moment, so that you don't kind of give away the ending before the ending happens. That's that kind of, you know, surprise element, that kind of thing. So your actions then are what you want, what you are going to do to influence them to that end. So your actions are kind of magic, because they actually give you something that you can actually do, and something to gauge whether or not you are doing the most effective thing to achieve that objective that you have set out for yourself. So we'll take a look at some examples now. So let's say you wanted them to feel worried. So that's the objective, and that's what you want them to do. So you're going to warn them. You're going to warn them with your tone of voice. You're going to warn them with your facial expressions. You're going to warn them. You're going to stress the stakes in that moment. You're going to really let them know what is going to happen. Just let them really feel worried, and you're going to feel worried so that you communicate that to them. Let's say you want them to feel excited. Well, you are going to pump them up. You are going to share your own enthusiasm. You know, you're going to use a different tone of voice than when we were warning, when we were making them feel worried. We're really going to be different, right? Like, that's not going to be the same. So again, you know, committing to that moment, so that then you can move on to like, no, now we're excited. Now this is good. Trusting your expertise. So again, you're going to show your credentials. Maybe you'll use a reassuring tone, you know, yeah, I've got this, you know, I've done years of this. I'm the person for this. Don't you worry. Give you funding, you know, you're going to highlight the potential impacts. You're going to show them the return on the investment. You're going to kind of really highlight the good that can be brought if they just gave you the money. So those are just some examples of ways that then you can give yourself something to do. And then you can see right there if you have achieved that objective, if that was the right action for that objective. Because if the objective succeeds, well, great, you did it. That was the right action. And if not, you can try something else. You can try what's called a different tactic or a different action to try to get that objective.
Okay, so we're in the breaking down your script section. So you've written this brilliant script, obviously, you know who your audience is, you have a clear objective, you know maybe your time frame, all of that stuff for writing your script. And now you're going to do this script work, like Merran mentioned. So the first thing you can do is break your script down into smaller sections. Usually actors will do this based on their objectives and actions. So maybe your first one would be, I'm going to welcome them. Next one is I'm going to get them to trust me. Next one is I'm going to, you know, etc. So kind of breaking it down. So you're doing one thing effectively at a time. And so you take your kind of your script, or if you're not someone who writes a word for word script, your kind of presentation outline, if that works better for you, but it's still broken down by these actions and objectives. Next thing I do with a script, and this is probably the #1 note Merran and I give when we're coaching the 3-minute thesis competitors or the shirt competitors, is find the comparisons in your script. So comparing the problem with the solution, comparing the first thing you did with the second thing you did. There's so many comparisons, and they really help the audience understand you, understand the sense of it, but they also help you compare and make arguments for why something is good or why something made sense, etc. So finding those comparisons. Find moments where new information is revealed, whether it's a term that your audience won't be familiar with that you're going to need to define, or where you're entering kind of a new concept or a new stage. So find where you have introduced new or important information. Also go through the script and find where you have shifts in tone. So that could be like the setup of something versus the reveal of the information. Or it could be where you've kind of created maybe a little bit of tension talking about the problem your research solves, and then a shift to what you've discovered, that kind of thing. So where are there shifts that you're going to kind of craft and make sure you emphasize so they can follow you? Also, other structural things. So do you have things like lists? Do you have kind of major sections? That kind of sort of structure that you're going to need to keep in mind in order to phrase your talk in a way that is understandable. And then moments where you emphasize the stakes. So we talk about stakes a lot. Stakes are really important in research communications because that is the why they should care. And we can get very insulated in our areas of study where we are like, obviously, this is the most important thing on earth. But to other people, it might not be. So what do we stand to gain by addressing this problem or this research question? And what do we stand to lose by not addressing it? So any kind of stakes, emotional stakes especially, but we all have stakes in all of our presentations. Verbs, so active words. This is again a very actory thing, but moments where there's action helps us follow what happened. So if you did something specific in your method, if you had to change gears, like anything where like an action was taken, it's kind of nice to go through and find those verbs. And lastly, punctuation. So if you are asking a question, we always encourage people to really ask it and expect an answer. If you have, kind of a lot of commas, you might realize that after you've gone through and really looked at your punctuation. Maybe you want to make those shorter sentences, which are easier to follow when you're communicating verbally. So kind of just going through and looking at that. And that's what we would do as actors is, highlight every exclamation point, highlight every question mark. So here's an example. So this is actually a talk that I did at a conference 2 years ago. This is kind of meta because it was about using story to communicate impact. But it was at a library conference. And so my script kind of for what I'm going to say is on the right, and then my actions and objectives is on the left. So this is kind of classically how actors are told to break down a script. So I have my actions and objectives. So first I want them to recognize how we always introduce the libraries by stats. So basically this presentation, I started by introducing our library at U of C by listing the number of students we serve and the number of kilometers of archival records we have. So kind of like how librarians always introduce their library. And then I kind of, during the talk, was like, this is how I should have done it and used story instead. So I had a bunch of different examples. So in this version of my script, I have, okay, I want them to recognize that I introduced the library the way we all do. I want them to appreciate how limiting that is. And then I want to set up kind of a story as an example of what another option could be. So I have my objectives and actions on the side, and then my script. So I went through and highlighted the verbs in green. I highlighted all my comparisons. So that's kind of what is in yellow. I went through and highlighted my punctuation so I know really to ask a question when I reach that question. And then later I have a parentheses because you phrase a parentheses kind of as a little side note. So I know to sort of that's there, that I need to say that in a specific way. Anywhere where there's stakes, I highlighted in blue. Anytime I'm introducing a new thing that I really need to emphasize, I have that bolded. So basically, this just helps me work through what I'm planning to say in terms of how I'm actually going to phrase it. And we don't really do this often for, in our writing style, which is so often like articles and things like that. You don't really think about how you would say it and how you have to actually kind of give yourself some clues on how to say it. So when we're coaching people, we're always saying like, that's a moment of stakes. Like we need that to hear that and let that land. That's a moment where you're introducing something they've never heard about. That's like a core concept you're going to keep coming back to. So that needs emphasis. So this is just an example of a way to kind of take your writing and sort of look at it in more detail in terms of what you're doing to the audience and how you should say things in order for them to follow you, but also in order to be effective. So that's just a quick little example.
Okay,
Moving
so now
on.
we're going to move on to practice, which, as Marianne said, people who are really good at public speaking, they practice. So, good job.
They do. All
Yeah.
right. That's me.
Thank you, Julia. So we're going to practice. We're going to talk about practicing your delivery. So the first thing you're going to do is it's really important to kind of physicalize the things based on the things that you've discovered working on your script. So just working on it, just kind of, with your script in front of you and just kind of going through and highlighting and looking for those comparisons, looking for all that things and all doing all that script work is very important. But the next step is actually getting it up on your feet. Because if you don't practice it up on your feet and you just kind of just stare at the words on a page, then they're just going to be words on a page. This is the moment where actors kind of lift it up. They lift the words from the page and they actually kind of put it, again, in actor talk, put it into space, into the room. They kind of do it with their bodies and make sure that they do it how they're actually going to be presenting it on stage. So again, imagine that you're actually talking to an audience and practice different actions with the lines of your script and actually do this out loud, imagining that the audience is in front of you, the way that you're going to do it, standing on your feet. Stressing the comparisons with your gesture or your voice. So again, if you're talking about this versus this, and kind of really, you can even put them into the space of kind of like, when I talk about that, I'm going to look over here and I'm going to refer to it over here. When I talk about this one, I'm going to look over here and I'm going to do this. Maybe I'm going to do that with my voice. This one is really, really good. This one is really, really bad. You're going to kind of like do the change with it, with your voice and gestures or your gestures. Again, holding up new concepts. We call that kind of like billboarding or holding up new concepts. So that's kind of emphasizing them for your audience. So, the first time that if you're talking about something that, you talk about every day, but we don't talk about it every day, then you're going to kind of hold up those concepts. So again, even if it's a word like oh, what's a word that would be a concept that would be so let's say
Chemistry.
chemistry. Julia loves a chemistry example. So, like let's say that you're talking about like, this particular molecule, but you're not just gonna go, oh, well, like this molecule works like that. So we're talking about this molecule. And you're going to really kind of let people go, oh, okay, we're talking about that molecule. Just so that, and again, you don't have to necessarily do it with your hands, but kind of with your voice of like, we're talking about this molecule, because not everyone talks about molecules in their life. I clearly don't. Took me a while to come up with it. Okay, so you're also going to change the energy when you have an identified shift. So you'll place that in your script. So if you've got really bad feelings at the start, but then you start talking about really good feelings and a really good solution, you've got like the bad feelings that come with the problem, but then you've got the really good solution. You've got the really good feelings. So you're going to talk about that. You're going to honor the punctuation. So again, as Julia said, really ask those questions like you were expecting an answer. Bringing energy to the exclamation marks. There's a reason that you wrote that exclamation mark. It's because it's exciting. It's because you want to show that it's exciting. Again, like phrasing the lists, making sure that a list is generally, it's not just one thing after another. It's generally building on something. Each thing is possibly more important or more specific as you go along the list. So you want to be making sure that you're changing your phrasing for that.
Wonderful. Okay. Man, this is the fastest presentation on earth. We're going into memorization. So memorization, you've probably had this happen where you've memorized something you really think you have, and then the tiniest thing kind of throws you off and suddenly you're lost. And it's like you're swimming in the dark. And probably that has happened because you have memorized it in a precarious way. So you do not want to memorize things by saying it the exact same way over and over and over, because then everything is so linked in sequence that if something disrupts that sequence, then suddenly it's gone. So you want to create resilient memorization by memorizing it in a bunch of different ways and keeping it flexible. And that helps too if you make last minute changes. So we recommend, well, for me especially, like getting up on my feet. So stuff like doing the script work we've been talking about, that is a great way to memorize. So moving it around the space, putting different concepts into different places, practicing doing different actions and sort of lifting it off the page as you're trying different actions. You can put it into different parts of your brain by writing it, by listening to it, by playing it back. I don't like to do that, but Merran likes to do that. So everybody's different. So basically kind of embodying it and experiencing it in different ways. You can say it in different voices. Maybe you want to just for fun say it like you're explaining it to a 5-year-old, that kind of thing. So saying it different ways, stressing different words, that's going to create a much more resilient memorization. Shorter sessions are good, 20 minutes at a time, and sleeping in between. Don't do it. You're not going to succeed doing it the morning before. The night before, maybe, but even then, probably not. So allowing it to kind of convert to that long-term memory.
So
Warming up.
warming up, yeah. So we don't really have time to go into this in depth. Julia and I do other workshops where we kind of actually take you through a full vocal warm up. But these are the components of a vocal warm up that we would go through the day on the day before we get on stage. So we would do this in the morning, or we do it kind of a couple hours before we are ready to present. Again, we're going to do this very quickly, just touching on each so that you can, but you can also really delve into each one. So breath, you're going to get your breath moving and responsive, doing kind of big actions, run up and down a flight of stairs, just kind of really get that breath responsive and moving to kind of free up your impulses. Placement, that's just bringing your voice forward, sending your energy forward through your towards your audience. Again, you can even do that by kind of imagining that you're talking to the back row of your audience, but if you warm up your placement, then that's going to kind of just send your energy forward. Resonators, so that's kind of activating different parts of your vocal range. So making sure that you warm up the lowest parts of your voice or the highest parts of your voice, doing kind of vocal trills to kind of bring you up and down, or moving through the different tones in your voice. That's also going to do that for you. Again, we don't have time, and we are not going to make you do silly noises over Zoom, but one day, if we ever meet you again, we will make you make silly noises. And then articulators. So again, that's getting your mouth moving and your consonants precise. And that's going to make you be more understood, as if, all your sounds are not kind of muddled together. They're very, very specific, and you can tell them apart.
Okay, managing nerves. So there are two types of speakers, those that are nervous and those that are liars. We often hear people say, you ask someone how their presentation was and they'll say, oh, I was really nervous. But we encourage you to detach the nerves from whether or not it was a successful presentation. You can still be effective. You can still be successful while being nervous. So think about whether or not you've achieved your objective rather than whether or not you're nervous, because nervous means that you care, and that is a good thing. So it's okay to be nervous. There are 4 kind of main anxiety mind traps. And one of the things that I find helpful is just being able to identify what your brain is doing when you're having those kind of panicked thoughts about presenting. The first one is overgeneralizing. I didn't like doing that presentation, so I don't like presenting, or I kind of messed that up, so I'm bad at presenting. Don't overgeneralize a bad presenting experience to all of them. Mind reading is the next one. So assuming you know what the audience is thinking, you really don't. They could be on their phone telling someone how great it is. You just can't tell. So, recognizing that you don't know what other people think. Shoulding is one. This is one that I do the most, which is saying that I should have done better. Like I had enough time to prepare. I didn't, like guilting yourself basically. But that's okay. We all have bad presentations. And lastly, catastrophizing. So I didn't do this good talk, so I'm not going to get funding. So I'm a bad researcher, and then I'm terrible at my job, and you just kind of snowball it. So these are very common, and they're not necessarily true. So if you experience any of these as you're nervous, try to remind yourself that this is probably not true. And this is a normal kind of anxious thought. And that's what's going on. We love breathing exercises around here. So we both love square breathing. So take a look at that. It's kind of inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, and holding again. I am often doing this right before I go on to help kind of bring my focus in and also kind of relax my nerves. And when it's going badly, when you're really up there struggling, come back to your audience and your objectives. So look out there at your audience, remember what it is you're trying to get them to think, do, and feel, and just come back into the room. Because so often we can just sink into our own little like doom moment where we're just so focused on ourselves and our knees shaking and our breathing, and we just kind of get lost internally. So bring your attention back out toward your audience and your objective, and that will help make sure that you're as effective as possible and bring you back to us, back to the room.
Think the thoughts and your breath will follow.
Yes, think the thoughts and your breath will follow. And that is it. And we are at time. But it's 12:30. I know people have places to go. I know that was very fast, but definitely keep an eye out for workshops with other workshops we have where we kind of take a little more time with these things. And I think we're both around if people do want to pop a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us know. But thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you both. And if we do have time for questions, we'll wait to see if they pop up in the chat. And while we're doing that, I just want to thank you for talking about stakes, because I know getting good at communicating science has and is becoming more and more important. I also love that you're bringing in stuff from theater to academia, because we all know what it's like to be in the audience, and we all know that we love sitting there wondering what's going to happen next.
Mm.
And that's my segue to say what's next is a fall full of, there'll be more webinars there will be coaching opportunities, there will be workshops. Julia and Merran run workshops. I can run workshops for different groups depending on what that skill or module is that you're looking for. So please do not hesitate to reach out. And now I will let you, Julia and Merran, go to the chat.
Yeah, we've got a few questions. So one of them is, will we share the slides with you? Yes, I'm sure we can do that. Another one is, what do our speaker notes look like for this talk? And how much do we rely on scripting during the presentation?
So our speaker notes for this talk are literally our initials to know what slides we're supposed to say. So we don't actually have a script written for this talk.
But with the caveat that we have talked about this for a long time and a
Yeah.
lot of our lives. So Julia and I now are at the place where like we, for the most part, can look at our slides and kind of know what we want to say. But I would say that we both always have our message in mind, and we always have kind of like our objectives. I think when we were first developing this kind of talk and this kind of presentation, we relied much more heavily on those things in terms of making sure that we knew what we were going to say and why we were saying it, and keeping that top of mind. And we still do that with our objective, but the words aren't necessarily always the same as we are saying them for the zillionth time.
But I will say, like, if I'm doing like a talk at a conference and I know it's 15 minutes or 10 minutes, I do write a full script.
Me too.
And I write it out and memorize it. But for something like this, yeah, we don't write it out word for word. I'm sure it's the same for you. You probably wouldn't write a script for like a lecture you were teaching, but you would if you were like, okay, this count. This is one of those important
I think also,
presentations.
especially if you know that you don't have a lot of time, like if you're going to write like a 3-minute talk or like a 7-minute something or that kind of thing, then my script is even more specific, because I know that I want to make sure that I'm getting everything that's important into it. And so I'm kind of much more precious with my words.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got another one here, which says, any suggestion how to build suspense at the beginning of a presentation on hard math, something highly technical?
Well, we do talk about suspense sometimes. There's a few kind of tricks here for tension. I wonder if tension is the same thing as suspense, but something that's very suspenseful for the average audience is silence. We talked about this, came up in the talks last week, but kind of building suspense through working in a moment of silence or asking a question and really expecting an answer and waiting for them to actually answer you without kind of letting them off the hook. That can build suspense. In terms of tension, we often talk about the conflict. So it could be like literal obstacles or opposing people or ideas, or it could be the conflict of a question, just like the suspense of this is a mystery. This question that my research addresses is a mystery.
Yeah, we love a
And
mystery. I think that's also something too to consider, is that kind of taking us along the journey in order, rather than kind of telling us the beginning or telling us the answer at the beginning. Kind of taking us along and kind of going, we had this problem, we had this question, this is what we were trying to solve. And so we did this, but that wasn't enough. That didn't solve it. So then then we did this, then we tried something else, you know, like kind of bringing us along so that you're not kind of saying like, and then we figured it out, right at the very beginning. I think that telling it to us in order of what did you do? What was the suspense for you? And then that's going to kind of make us go, okay, all right.
Yeah. Don't introduce it by, here, we solved hard math and we're going to tell you how. And then people are like, oh, endings ruined, spoiler alert. Guess they solved it. So I hope that answers your question as an idea.
I think
And
you
that's it.
yeah,
That
covered
was
it. Thank
it.
you so much again, you guys. I can't wait to
Thank
do
you.
some things with you.